I received an email yesterday that I've been reading over and over again. It's from a man named Lewis. Now, usually when we hear stories about expats getting taken for a ride, we think of the typical stereotypes, the backpacker bars in Thailand or the beaches in Bali. But Lewis's story is different. He's a retired executive from Silicon Valley, a man who built his life on logic and data. He didn't retire to a beach hut. He retired to a multi-million-dollar penthouse in the sky in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. He thought he was smart enough to spot a scam. He thought his experience in the cutthroat corporate world made him untouchable. But he found out the hard way that in the high society circles of Southeast Asia, the predators don't look like predators. They look like supermodels with business degrees. Lewis sent me this story because he wants to warn other men who think they are too smart to be tricked. It's a long ride, full of red flags, luxury cars, and a revenge plot that is honestly chef's kiss. So, grab your coffee or your drink, sit back, and get comfortable. And before we jump into Lewis's life, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us get these stories out to the people who need to hear them. My name is Lewis. I'm 62 years old, and for the better part of 3 decades, I was a ghost in my own life. I worked in the semiconductor industry in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley. When people hear that, they think of Google slides and ping pong tables, but my world was supply chains, fabrication yields, and screaming matches with vendors in Taiwan at 3 a.m. I made a lot of money. A lot of money. But I paid for it with 2 failed marriages, a hairline that retreated before I turned 40, and blood pressure that my cardiologist constantly nagged me about. When I finally pulled the ripcord and cashed out my stock options 2 years ago, I knew I couldn't stay in States. California had become a ghost town of memories for me, and the cost of living was frankly insulting, even for someone with my net worth. I wanted adventure, but I didn't want chaos. I wanted luxury, but I wanted value. That's how I landed on Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. KL is the best-kept secret in Asia. It's not as sterile as Singapore, not as chaotic as Bangkok. It's a metropolis of steel and glass rising out of the jungle. I got myself a Malaysia My Second Home visa, sold a house in Palo Alto, and bought a penthouse at the Troika. I'm talking about a view that stares directly into the face of the Petronas Twin Towers. Every night, I'd stand on my balcony with a scotch, looking at those glowing spires, thinking I'd finally won. I was the king of my own little kingdom. But here's the thing nobody tells you about retiring abroad. The silence is deafening. My routine was perfect on paper. I wake up at 7 a.m., head down to a Capicium in Bangsar for kopi o kosong and toast, read the Wall Street Journal on my iPad, and check my portfolio. By noon, I was done. I had nothing to do. I have money, I have my health, but I had nobody to share it with. The expat community here is a mixed bag. You have the oil and gas guys who are never home, and the other retirees who just want to complain about the humidity or politics back home. I told myself I was happy. I told myself I was a lone wolf. But deep down, every man wants to be admired. And that vanity? That was the crack in the armor that let Katie in. It happened on a Thursday night. I was at Marini's on 57. If you haven't been, it's an Italian rooftop bar right next to the towers. It's the kind of place where a cocktail costs what a local family spends on groceries for a week. The air conditioning is freezing, the lighting is dim, and the clientele is new money screaming for attention. I was sitting at the bar, nursing a Negroni, trying to look mysterious rather than lonely. That's when I felt a presence next to me. "Excuse me," a voice said. "I hate to bother you, but you look like you understand American business." I turned around, and there she was. Katie. She wasn't dressed like the girls you're warned about. There was no heavy makeup, no revealing dress. She was wearing a sharp, cream-colored blazer, tailored trousers, and her hair was pulled back in a severe, professional bun. She looked like she had just walked out of a boardroom defeat. She was young, maybe late 20s, but she carried herself with a weary sophistication. She was undeniably beautiful, with that porcelain skin and sharp features that define a certain class of local Chinese Malaysian women, but she didn't lead with her looks. She led with her stress. "I'm sorry," I asked, putting my drink down. "My investors," she sighed, gesturing to an empty table behind her with a half-drunk glass of wine. They're Americans. From Chicago. I'm trying to pitch my branding agency to them for a localized expansion, but I feel like I'm speaking a different language. You look like you've sat on that side of the table before. It was the perfect hook. If she had bought me a drink or complimented my watch, my defenses would have gone up. I know the game. I know that as an older white man in Asia, I have a target painted on my back. But she wasn't asking for money. She was asking for expertise. She was appealing to the one thing I missed most about my old life, being the boss, being the guy with the answers. Chicago, huh? I chuckled, turning my stool to face her. Midwesterners. They value straight talk. Don't fluff the numbers. She pulled out a notebook, a physical notebook, and she started taking notes. Please, she said, her eyes wide with focus. Tell me more. I'm Katie, by the way. Lewis. We talked for 2 hours. We didn't talk about romance or travel. We talked about ROI, brand synergy, and corporate structures. She told me she ran a boutique PR firm called Luminous Strategy. She spoke perfect English with that charming, melodic Malaysian accent where the sentences clip at the end. She seemed ambitious, driven, and fiercely independent. She paid for her own drinks. When the bill came, she slapped her card down before I could even reach for my wallet. No, Lewis, she said firmly, you gave me $1 million worth of advice tonight. The wine is on me. I was floored. In my 2 years in KL, no woman had ever bought me a drink. It flipped the script completely. I walked her to the elevator, and she didn't ask for my number. She just shook my hand firmly, gave me a polite smile, and got into a grab car downstairs. I went back to my penthouse that night, and for the first time in months, the silence didn't feel so heavy. My mind was racing. I was thinking about her business problems, how I could help her fix her pitch deck. I felt useful again. I didn't realize it then, but that was the masterful first move of a long con. She knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't hunting for a wallet. She was hunting for a savior. She knew that men like me don't mind spending money, but we hate feeling used. So she made sure that in our first meeting, she was the one paying. It was an investment, a calculated loss leader to acquire a high-value asset, me. 2 days later, I found her on LinkedIn. I sent a connection request with a note. Hope the Chicago pitch went well. She replied 10 minutes later, it was a disaster, but your advice saved me from total embarrassment. Can I buy you coffee to say thank you properly? I looked at the screen and smiled. I thought I was mentoring a bright young entrepreneur. I had no idea I was walking straight into a trap that would cost me my dignity, my reputation, and almost my sanity. If you've never dated a woman 30 years your junior, let me tell you, it's the best non-surgical facelift money can buy. For the first 2 months, I wasn't Lewis, the retired guy with high cholesterol and a Netflix addiction. I was Lewis, the silver fox, the wise mentor, the man of the world. And Katie? She was the perfect tour guide to a life I didn't know I was missing. We started meeting for strategy sessions that quickly morphed into dinner dates. She pulled me out of my expat bubble. You see, most Americans in Kuala Lumpur stick to a 5-mile radius around the Twin Towers. We eat overpriced burgers, drink overpriced beer, and complain about the traffic. Katie dragged me into the real city. She took me to a hole-in-the-wall spot in Chinatown where we sat on red plastic stools that were definitely not designed for an American backside. We ate clay pot chicken rice while stray cats watched us from the alley. I was sweating through my polo shirt, the humidity was at 90%, and I was trying to fend off a mosquito the size of a drone. But Katie looked at me, dabbed sweat from my forehead with a tissue, and said, "You look so rugged when you're not in air conditioning." I ate it up. I ate the chicken, the rice, and the compliment. She had this incredible way of making me feel like an insider. She taught me the local slang, how to use la at the end of sentences to sound authentic, though I probably sounded like a malfunctioning GPS. She introduced me to the king of fruits, durian. If you haven't smelled it, imagine eating a custard tart inside a gym locker room. I gagged. She laughed, a deep, throaty laugh that made every other guy in the restaurant look at our table with envy. But then the improvement started. It began with my wardrobe. I've always been a comfort-first guy. Cargo shorts, for all the cargo I don't carry, and comfortable New Balance sneakers. One afternoon, we were walking through Pavilion, the premier luxury mall here. It's a marble palace where air conditioning goes to die and credit cards go to be maxed out. Katie stopped in front of a window display. "Louis," she said, tilting her head, "you are a distinguished man, a tech titan, but you dress like you're going to a barbecue in Ohio." I laughed. "I am from Ohio." "Not anymore," she said, grabbing my hand. "In Asia, we have a concept called face. People judge your capability by your presentation. When you dress like this, people think you're a retiree on a pension. But you're a shark, Louis. You need to look like a shark." Next thing I knew, I was in a changing room at Hugo Boss, staring at a reflection I barely recognized. The suit cost RM 8,000, about $2,000 US. I didn't flinch at the price. I flinched at how good I looked. When I walked out, Katie's eyes lit up. She didn't just look at me. She looked up to me. "Now," she whispered, adjusting my lapel. "Everyone knows you are the man in charge." That was the hook. She wasn't asking for gifts. She was curating my brand. Then came the car conversation. I rely on Grab. It's the Uber of Southeast Asia. It's cheap, efficient, and I don't have to deal with KL drivers who view traffic lights as mere suggestions. "It's embarrassing, Louis," Katie said one night as we waited for a Parajo Maivai, a tiny local hatchback, to pick us up from a gala. "A man of your stature waiting on the curb? My friends ask why you don't drive a Porsche, or at least a Mercedes. It worries me. I don't want people to think you're struggling." "I'm not struggling," I said, amused. "I'm efficient. Perception is reality here, sayang," she said, using the Malay word for love. "I just want you to be respected. I didn't buy the Porsche. Not yet. But I stopped taking the cheap grabs. I switched to Grablux. Small victory for her. The first real red flag waved right in my face about 6 weeks in, and I did what every lonely man does. I put on rose-colored glasses and ignored it. We were at the St. Regis for high tea. It's a very colonial, very posh affair. Scones, clotted cream, harp music. The waiter was a young Burmese guy, clearly nervous. He accidentally poured the tea a little too aggressively, and 3 drops, literally 3 drops, splashed onto the saucer near Katie's phone. Her reaction was instantaneous. The charming, laughing girl vanished. Her face twisted into a scowl that could curdle milk. "Are you blind?" she snapped, loud enough for the next table to hear. "Look what you did. This is an Hermes case." The boy panicked, apologizing profusely in broken English, trying to wipe it with a cloth. "Don't touch it," she hissed, snatching the phone away. She said something to him in Cantonese that I didn't understand, but the tone was pure venom. She waved her hand dismissively, shooing him away like a stray dog. I sat there, stunned. "Katie, it was an accident. He's just a kid." She took a deep breath, composed herself, and the smile flickered back on like a light switch. "I know, honey. I'm sorry. I just have high standards. In Malaysia, if you don't affirm with the help, they walk all over you. I'm doing it for us. We shouldn't accept mediocrity." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I just want everything to be perfect when I'm with you." See what she did there? She made her cruelty sound like a compliment to me. I let it slide. I told myself it was a cultural difference. Then the financial creep began. It wasn't a demand for a diamond ring. It was subtle. We were at an omakase dinner, chef's choice sushi, flown in from Japan that morning. The bill came to about $600 US. Katie opened her purse and gasped. She rummaged through it, her face flushing pink. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I left my wallet in my other bag. The Prada one. I was so rushing to see you. I completely forgot." She looked up at me, eyes shimmering with mortification. "Louis, I am so embarrassed. Can you cover this? I'll transfer you the money instantly when we get back." "Don't be ridiculous," I said, handing my credit card to the server. "I've got it. It's dinner." "No, I insist," she said, looking distraught. "I don't want you to think I'm one of those girls. I have my own money." She never transferred the money, and I never asked, because that night she came back to my penthouse for the first time, and the way she looked at me, well, let's just say a $600 sushi bill felt like a bargain for the way she made me feel. I thought I was the one in control. I thought I was the sophisticated American teaching her the ways of the world. But looking back, I was just a wallet with a pulse, and she was just getting started. The decision to move in together wasn't born out of romance. It was born out of Kuala Lumpur traffic. If you have ever tried to drive from Petaling Jaya to the city center at 5:30 p.m., you know it's a spiritual experience, in the sense that you pray for death. Katie was spending 2 hours a day in traffic just to come see me. One rainy Tuesday, she arrived at my door looking like a wet cat, shivering and exhausted. "I can't do the federal highway anymore, Lewis," she sobbed into my chest. "It's killing my creativity. I spend 3 hours a day staring at brake lights when I could be building our future." Logic kicked in. I'm a supply chain guy. Inefficiency bothers me. "It doesn't make sense," I agreed. "Just stay here. We have 3 bedrooms. It's a waste of space for just me." She hesitated, or pretended to. "Are you sure? I don't want to encroach on your sanctuary." 3 days later, the encroachment began. I expected a suitcase or 2, maybe a box of books. What arrived was a logistics operation that rivaled the Normandy landings. A moving truck backed into the loading bay of the Troika, and 3 guys started hauling up boxes marked fragile, wardrobe, and shoes summer. "I thought you were a minimalist?" I asked, watching a procession of Louis Vuitton trunks roll into my living room. "I am," she said, directing the movers to clear out my bookshelf. "But a brand consultant needs options, Siong. These are my tools of the trade." If these were tools, she was over-equipped for the job. I did a quick mental calculation. I saw bags from Chanel, Dior, and brands I couldn't even pronounce. For a woman who claimed her clients were slow to pay, she was wearing the GDP of a small island nation. But again, I rationalized it. She's in fashion, I told myself. She probably gets this stuff for free or at a discount. Spoiler alert, she did not get it for free. Once she was in, the optimization of my life went into overdrive. My favorite leather recliner, a lazy boy I had shipped from America, the kind of chair that hugs you back, was the first casualty. "It has bad feng shui," Katie declared one morning, standing over it with a grimace. "It has great lumbar support," I countered. "No, Lewis. I had a master come in while you were golfing. He said this chair blocks the flow of chi from the balcony. It's blocking your wealth energy. I have plenty of wealth energy. It's in my Vanguard account. Please." She gave me that look, the lower lip tremble, the wide doe eyes. "For me? I just want you to be healthy." The lazy boy went into storage. It was replaced by a beige, avant-garde Italian sofa that looked like a piece of abstract art and felt like sitting on a marble slab. But the apartment looked cleaner, she said. It certainly looked more like a hotel lobby, which I soon learned was the point. Then came the isolation. It wasn't aggressive. It was a slow erosion of my social circle. I have a group of friends here, mostly retired guys from the UK, Australia, and Texas. We meet on Wednesdays for steaks and whiskey. We talk about the old days, complain about our prostates, and argue about whether cricket is a real sport. Kitty came once. She sat there on her phone the entire time, sipping sparkling water with a look of mild disgust. When my friend Bob, a loud, lovable oil man from Houston, cracked a joke about his 3rd ex-wife, Katie didn't even smile. On the ride home, the critique started. "They are so negative," she said, scrolling through Instagram. "All they talk about is the past. You're different, Lewis. You are vibrant. You have a future. Being around that energy, it ages you." Then my friends, Katie. "I know," she sighed, resting her head on my shoulder. "I just don't want them to drag you down. You're an eagle, Lewis. You shouldn't be scratching around with chickens." Slowly, I stopped going to steak night. I started going to her events instead. And let me tell you, if you think old men talking about cricket is boring, try listening to 20-somethings talk about personal branding and algorithmic reach for 3 hours. I was the oldest person in the room at these parties by 30 years. I stood in the corner, holding a craft cocktail that tasted like lawn clippings, paying for tables, while Katie floated around the room like a queen bee. She introduced me as her partner, but I felt more like her financier. "This is Lewis," she'd say. "He used to run Silicon Valley." "Used to," some kid with a perm and a Gucci belt would ask. "What's your handle? You on TikTok?" I didn't have a handle. I had a headache. Then about 4 months into living together, the trap snapped shut. We were sitting on the beige torture sofa, watching the rain hit the Twin Towers. Katie was quiet, unusually quiet. "What's wrong?" I asked. She wiped a tear. A single, cinematic tear. "I feel like a failure, Lewis." "What?" "You're doing great. You have the brand thing. It's small time," she sniffed. "I have a vision, Lewis. A real vision. There's a space opening up in Montkiera. The lease is available. I want to open a luxury aesthetics clinic. Lumina Glow. Botox, fillers for drips. It's a gold mine. The margins are 400%. My ears perked up. Margins. Numbers. This I understood. "Okay," I said, sitting up. "That's a competitive market, but if the location is right, how much capital do you need?" "The deposit and renovation. It's about RM 200,000, she said softly. "That's about 45,000 US dollars. I have some savings, but the banks are so slow with loans for new businesses. And the landlord needs a check by Friday. I went into business mode. Okay, let's look at the business plan. Show me the P&L projections, the competitor analysis, and the lease terms. If the numbers work, I can loan you the money with interest. We'll draw up a contract." The room went silent. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Katie looked at me like I had just slapped her. "A contract?" she whispered. "A loan? Lewis, I thought we were partners. I thought you believed in me. I do believe in you. That's why I want to see the plan." "No." She stood up, her voice rising. "You sound like a bank. You sound like those people who told me I'd never make it because I'm a woman. If you loved me, you would trust my vision. You spend more than that on your stocks. But investing in me? That requires paperwork." She ran to the bedroom and slammed the door. I sat there confused. In my world, due diligence was a sign of respect. In her world, apparently, asking where the money was going was an insult to our love. I slept on the couch that night. The next morning, over a silent breakfast, I wrote the check. I told myself it was an investment in her future. I told myself RM 200,000 was a small price to pay to see her smile again. I didn't ask for the contract, and I certainly never saw a business plan. There's a specific kind of torture known only to wealthy men in Southeast Asia, the charity gala. It's an event where you pay an exorbitant amount of money for a table, eat rubbery chicken that arrived on a conveyor belt, and listen to speeches that are longer than the flight from Kuala Lumpur to London. But you go because in this town, visibility is currency. Katie insisted we attend the Prestige Ball at the Grand Hyatt. She called it a networking necessity for her aesthetics clinic, which, by the way, still hadn't opened, though my bank account was RM 200,000 lighter. "It's about positioning, Lewis," she said, adjusting my bow tie. "We need to be seen as a power couple." She was wearing a dress that looked like it was made of diamonds and spiderwebs. I didn't ask how much it cost. I assumed it was a business expense. I was wearing a tuxedo that made me feel like a penguin who had lost his way. The night started innocently enough. We sat at a table with a mix of people, a property developer, a datin, a titled lady, with hair so high it defied gravity, and a silent man in a batik shirt who looked like he'd rather be fishing. The problem with free-flow moat in Shandong is that it acts as a truth serum for the insecure. And Katie was very, very insecure. By the third glass, the veneer of the sophisticated businesswoman began to crack. She started dominating the conversation, talking loudly about our investments and our penthouse. I noticed the datin exchanging glances with the property developer. In high society Malaysia, bragging is like flatulence. Everyone does it, but you're supposed to be silent about it. Katie was practically holding a megaphone. Then came the incident with the batik man. The older gentleman next to me, Mr. Tan, was quiet. He was wearing a simple, loose silk batik shirt, traditional formal wear here, but understated. He was eating his fish quietly. Katie, emboldened by the bubbles, leaned over to me, but she didn't whisper. "Lewis," she giggled, gesturing with her flute. "Look at him. It's a black tie event. Did his driver get lost on the way to the night market? It's so disrespectful to the dress code." The table went dead silent. I froze. In Malaysia, the richest men don't wear Armani. They wear sandals and drive Toyotas. I turned to Mr. Tan. "I apologize," I started. Mr. Tan just smiled. a small, dangerous smile. It is comfortable, young lady. My wife likes the pattern. She owns the factory that makes it, and the hotel we are sitting in. He didn't say it with anger. He said it with the calm detachment of a man who could buy my entire existence with his petty cash. He was Tan Sri Tan, one of the biggest tycoons in the country. I wanted to slide under the table and die. Tan Sri, I said, my face burning. Please forgive us. The champagne. It's okay, Lewis. Katie interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. She didn't know who he was, and she didn't care. She was on a roll. Don't apologize for having standards. Some people just don't get it. Right, Lewis? We're the only ones here with real taste. Katie, stop! I hissed, grabbing her wrist under the table. That is a Tan Sri. You are embarrassing yourself. She ripped her arm away, and the glass of champagne flew. It shattered against the centerpiece, sending shards and expensive alcohol everywhere. The ballroom, which had been a dull roar of chatter, fell silent. All eyes turned to table 12. Embarrassing myself? She screeched. She stood up, swaying slightly. The room was watching. I'm the only reason anyone even talks to you, Lewis. Look at you. You're a boring, old, retired nobody. I made you interesting. I styled you. I built your brand. My blood ran cold. It wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. Sit down, Katie, I said quietly. No, she yelled, pointing a manicured finger at my chest. You think you're the prize? I'm the prize. You're just the wallet. You should be on your knees thanking me for being seen with a geriatric like you. You think these people respect you? They laugh at you. They only tolerate you because I make you look alive. She was panting, her chest heaving, waiting for me to fight back. She wanted a scene. She wanted the drama. She wanted me to beg her to calm down so she could forgive me later for a price. But I'm a supply chain guy. When a link in the chain is broken, you don't argue with it. You cut it. I stood up slowly. I buttoned my jacket. I turned to Tan Sri Tan and bowed my head slightly. My apologies, Tan Sri. Enjoy your evening. Then I looked at Katie. I didn't yell. I didn't frown. I looked at her like one looks at a bad investment report. You're right, I said, my voice carrying in the silent room. I'm just a wallet, but the bank is closed. I turned and walked away. Lewis, she screamed after me. Don't you dare walk away from me. You can't leave me here. How am I supposed to get home? I didn't look back. I walked out of the ballroom, past the shocked ushers, and into the humid KL night. The silence in the elevator was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. I got into a Grab, an economy one, just for old time's sake, and opened the app that controlled my penthouse smart home system. Troika Penthouse, Master Lock, status, unlocked, action, change passcode, new code, generated. I then texted the concierge at the front desk. Ms. Katie is no longer resident. Do not authorize the elevator for her. I will bring her belongings down to the lobby within the hour. When I got home, I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I packed. I moved with the efficiency of a man who had packed up fabrication plants in Taiwan in 48 hours. Clothes went into garbage bags. The makeup, the creams, the tools of the trade, they all went into boxes. I didn't break anything. I wasn't vindictive. I was precise. By the time her 45 missed calls had rolled in, her life was sitting in a pile next to the security guard's desk in the lobby. I told the guard, a burly Nepali man named Gurung who I always tipped well at Christmas. If she screams, call the police. If she asks for me, tell her Mr. Lewis is sleeping. I went back up to the 38th floor, poured a glass of water, and sat in my old lazy boy, which I had dragged out of storage immediately upon entering the apartment. I watched the lights of the Twin Towers. My phone buzzed again. A text from Katie. You can't do this. I will ruin you. I took a sip of water. Blocked, I said out loud, and tapped the screen. For the first time in a year, I was alone, and it felt expensive, in a good way. You know the best thing about being single in your 60s? It's the silence. But the second best thing is the bank statement. For the first month after the great eviction, I tracked my expenses. Without Katie's necessary brand maintenance, the weekly facials, the surprise Sephora hauls, the omakase dinners that cost more than my first car, my monthly burn rate dropped by 70%. I wasn't just saving money. I was practically printing it. I went back to my roots. I called up Bob and the boys for steak night. When I walked into the steakhouse, a comfortable place with sawdust on the floor and zero ambience, Bob looked up from his ribeye. "Well, look who it is," he drawled, tipping his cowboy hat. "The prisoner has escaped Alcatraz." "I'm back," I said, sliding into the booth. "And I'm buying." "Damn right you are," Bob laughed. "We thought we lost you to the Instagram cult, son. You were starting to dress like a European DJ. It took about 3 whiskeys to explain the whole saga. They didn't say, 'I told you so,' even though they had every right to. That's the thing about old friends. They just pour you another drink and tell you that you're an idiot, but you're their idiot." I started playing golf again at the Royal Selangor Golf Club. It's a beautiful course right in the city center, mostly because it's filled with monkeys who will steal your ball if you slice it into the trees. I found it therapeutic. A monkey stealing my titleist was less robbery than what Katie had been doing for the last year. But while I was finding peace, Katie was finding an audience. I had blocked her on everything: WhatsApp, Instagram, carrier pigeon. But Kuala Lumpur is a small town masquerading as a big city. The expat telegraph is faster than fiber optic internet. One afternoon, Bob slid his phone across the table at the golf club. "You might want to see this. Or maybe you don't. But you should know what the enemy is doing." I looked at the screen. It was Katie's Instagram story. She was filming herself in a darkened room, looking tragically beautiful with a filter that made her eyes look glassy. "It's hard," she whispered to her followers, "to give everything to a narcissist, to support someone emotionally and financially, only to be controlled. I was trapped in a golden cage, guys. Financial abuse is real. I'm just lucky I got out before he drained me completely. I almost choked on my iced tea. Financial abuse. She supported me." "Apparently," Bob chuckled. "Word on the street is that you were broke, Lewis. A fake rich guy. She claimed she was paying for the penthouse, and you were just a squatter." "That's impressive fiction," I said, scrolling through the comments. There were hundreds of them. "You go, queen. Know your worth. Men are trash." She had successfully rebranded herself from gold digger to survivor. She was spinning a narrative where I was the villain, a controlling, possessive, broke old man who couldn't handle her success. I could have sued her for defamation. I could have posted the bank transfers. But I didn't. Why? Because in the supply chain of life, garbage eventually takes itself out. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, the garbage truck arrived. His name was Liam. I saw them at a cafe in Bangsar. Liam was everything I wasn't. He was 30, British, and wore a t-shirt that said Bitcoin billionaire. He was loud. He was vaping indoors. And he had a bright green Lamborghini parked illegally on the sidewalk outside. Katie was clinging to his bicep like a barnacle, looking at him the same way she used to look at me, like he was a delicious, walking ATM. Classic, I muttered to myself, watching from across the street. I asked around about Liam. Turns out he was a crypto consultant. In KL, that usually means he owns 0.5 Bitcoin and rents the Lamborghini by the hour for photo shoots. He was perfect for her. They were 2 sharks circling each other, both thinking the other one was the whale. I gave it 3 months before they started eating each other alive. I went back to my quiet life. But the universe has a funny way of balancing the books. A week later, I got an email. It wasn't from a Nigerian prince or a local scammer. It was from Jim, an old colleague from Silicon Valley. Jim had pivoted from tech to high-end hospitality years ago. Subject: KL project. Need a ghost. Lewis, long time. Heard you're retired in Malaysia, living the good life. I'm in a bind. My group, the Aurelia Collection, is launching a flagship hotel and residence in Kuala Lumpur next year. Massive budget. We need a local strategic advisor. Someone who knows the ground, but thinks like an American. Silent partner role. Good equity. You interested in looking at the deck? I was about to hit delete. I was retired. I was done with work. But then I read the next line. P.S. We're also looking to hire a local brand ambassador and a boutique PR firm to handle the launch. We want a young, local face to bridge the gap. We've got a lot of applications, but the market is murky. Could use your BS detector. A slow smile spread across my face. I replied, I'm in. Send the deck. And Jim, let me handle the PR interviews personally. I knew Katie. I knew her patterns. I knew that a massive budget launch for an American luxury brand would be like catnip to her. She wouldn't be able to resist. She would apply. She would use her fake Lumina strategy agency. She would try to hustle Jim the same way she hustled me. I wasn't just going back to work. I was setting a trap, and the bait was a multi-million-dollar contract. Revenge is a dish best served cold, but in corporate Kuala Lumpur, it's best served in an air-conditioned boardroom with a projector and a tray of iced lattes. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the Exchange 106, one of the tallest towers in Southeast Asia. Jim and the board of the Aurelia collection had flown in from Chicago. I had briefed them on the situation. I didn't frame it as a personal vendetta. I framed it as rigorous vendor vetting. Jim, knowing me for 30 years, just grinned and said, "You're a scary man when you're bored, Lewis." I sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, my back to the door, swiveling my chair to look out at the skyline. I was the silent advisor. At 9:55 a.m., Katie arrived. I could hear her heels clicking on the marble floor before she even entered. Click-clack, click-clack. The sound of unearned confidence. She walked in with an assistant, some poor intern carrying a stack of handouts, and breezed past the reception. "Good morning, gentlemen," she purred. I could hear the smile in her voice. "I'm Katie, founder of Lumina Strategy. I am so excited to disrupt the hospitality paradigm with you today." Disrupt the paradigm. I almost laughed out loud. She didn't see my face. She only saw the backs of the chairs and the faces of Jim and the two other executives, who nodded politely. "Please proceed," Jim said, his face a mask of neutral curiosity. The lights dimmed. The projector hummed. Katie began. It was spectacular. Spectacularly bad. Her slide deck was a masterclass in nonsense. It was filled with buzzwords like holistic synergy, hyperlocal vertical integration, and sensory brand activation. It meant absolutely nothing. But the cherry on top? The visuals. I recognized the graphics immediately. They were lifted directly from a Ritz-Carlton campaign I had seen in a trade magazine 3 years ago. She hadn't even changed the font. She had literally just slapped her logo, a gold L, over the Ritz lion. She talked for 20 minutes, using her hands a lot, talking about her extensive network of high-net-worth individuals, which I assumed meant the guys she met on Tinder. And finally, she concluded, flashing a dazzling smile, "We propose a monthly retainer of RM 50,000 to manage your complete brand entry. We will leverage my personal influence to ensure Aurelia becomes the talk of the town." The room was silent. Jim looked at me. "That's a very impressive proposal," Jim said. "But our senior advisor has a few questions about the data." "Of course," Katie beamed, turning towards my end of the table. "I love data." I slowly spun my chair around. The color didn't just drain from her face. It evacuated the building. Her jaw actually went slack. She looked like she had seen a ghost, or perhaps a creditor. "Hello, Katie," I said, leaning forward and steepling my fingers. "Lewis?" she squeaked. What do you work here?" "I consult," I said calmly. "And I have to say, I'm confused by slide 14. I picked up the laser pointer and aimed it at the screen. "This demographic breakdown," I said. "You claim to have a reach of 500,000 affluent locals. But when I ran a basic audit on your Lumina Strategy social accounts this morning, 92% of your followers are bots based in Russia and Brazil. Unless Aurelia is planning to open a resort in a St. Petersburg server farm. I fail to see the value." That's an algorithm error," she stammered, sweating through her Chanel foundation. "Instagram is glitchy, right?" I continued, flipping a page in my folder. "And then there's the case studies. You list the Lumina Glow Aesthetics Clinic as a success story. You claim you launched it to record-breaking profits." I looked her dead in the eye. "But Katie, I checked the company's Commission of Malaysia database this morning. That company was never registered. In fact, the only thing that was launched was a RM 200,000 personal loan from a private investor that vanished in a Gucci bags and a trip to Bali. Wouldn't you agree?" The silence in the room was heavy enough to crush a diamond. The intern looked at Katie, then at me, and slowly took a step away from her boss. "This is unprofessional," Katie snapped. her voice rising to that screechy pitch I knew so well. Jim, this man is my ex-boyfriend. He's a stalker. He's obsessed with me. You can't listen to him. He's just bitter because I dumped him. Jim didn't blink. He looked at the slide deck, then at Katie. Miss Katie, Jim said, his voice cold. Lewis didn't create these slides. You did. And he didn't fake these numbers. You did. We don't care about your personal life. We care about fraud. And this presentation? It's fraud. Jim closed the folder. We're done here. Security will escort you out. Katie stood there, trembling. She looked at me, hoping for what? Mercy? Another check? Lewis, she whispered. Please. I took a sip of my coffee. You should go, Katie. The traffic on the federal highway is terrible this time of day. You don't want to get stuck in a grab economy, do you? She grabbed her bag, shoved her intern out of the way, and stormed out. I heard the click-clack of her heels again, but this time it sounded like a retreat. When the door closed, the room was quiet for a second. Then Jim burst out laughing. Disrupting the paradigm, Jim wiped a tear from his eye. Lewis, who didn't tell me she was a comedian. She's an expensive ticket, I said, closing my laptop. But the show is finally over. I didn't feel a rush of adrenaline. I didn't feel malicious joy. I just felt balanced. The ledger was closed. The supply chain was clean. I walked out of the office tower and into the heat of Kuala Lumpur. I took a deep breath of the humid, exhaust-filled air. It smelled like freedom. I walked a few blocks to a local capicium, sat on a wobbly plastic stool, and ordered a kopi peng iced coffee for 3 ringgit. It was sweet, cold, and strong. I watched the city move around me. The motorbikes weaving through traffic, the aunties selling nasi lemak, the construction cranes building the next skyscraper. I was just another old man in a polo shirt drinking coffee alone. And for the first time in my life, that was exactly enough. If you think you're too smart to get scammed, remember, the most expensive things in life aren't the ones with price tags. They're the ones that tell you exactly what you want to hear. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please do me a massive favor. Smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets us find more incredible stories like this one. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We have plenty more stories coming up about relationships, revenge, and the crazy things that happen when money and deception collide. Have you ever encountered a Katie in your life? Or maybe you have a revenge story of your own. Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Stay smart, keep your wallet close, and we'll see you in the next one.